everybody. And in my weekly scoop, I update you on some of the biggest action items across our platforms during this week. And of course, one of those is the BATSETA conference, which I'm going to label as excellent. I think the balance of content between investments and retirement fund, legal and technical stuff was perfect. And it cannot go without saying the absolute privilege and treat it was to hear from the Finance Minister, Enoch Godongwana, who addressed all delegates on day one as the keynote speaker. Now, Enoch's invitation to the retirement fund industry was one of participating in the building of our country and our continent going into the future. And of course, I'm talking about infrastructure investing, where he really put forward a very persuasive case for retirement funds to be considering and investing in the South Africa of the future. And that could be water, which was talked about a number of times at this year's BATSETA conference, but other infrastructure projects as well: power, energy transmission, schools, hospitals, and all the things that go along with that. So a lot of the conversation at BATSETA was dominated by infrastructure and impact investing, but that's not a bad thing, because the one thing that BATSETA did very, very cleverly was arrange some trustee training on day 3. And this really unpacked some of the more fundamental stuff around private markets and venture capital, and really starting with what is the definition of infrastructure, and building from that grassroots level, positioning opportunities and bankable investments and projects to trustees of big retirement funds and small retirement funds to get involved in the story of South Africa, at least the future of South Africa. And so a really, really good conversation there, and an expansion of thought, and perhaps a challenging of thought around how what we've done in the past is not going to help us for the problems of the future. And one of the plenary sessions, which was really widely quoted, was that of 4 CEOs discussing the opportunities presented to retirement funds and the returns that they are leaving on the table by investing in the same large managers. There were some great stats quoted around that, and some excellent feedback and research that you can catch on EBNet's publication podium, and that's at www.ebnet.co.za. So the private markets versus listed markets opportunities were discussed in some detail. It's difficult to mention all my highlights. You'll have to go and catch up on my day's articles after each day, where you'll see some of the highlights that stuck with me and have really prompted my thinking when it comes to retirement funds, their investments, and the legislative frameworks going forward. Now, the opportunities presented by private markets is an interesting one, because today's episode of Exec Meet and Greet is with Warren Wheatley, who is the CEO of African Bitcoin Corporation. Now, you may know that, you may remember that as Altvest, but Warren is a disruptor, or a contrarian thinker, or a different thinker, let's call him that, before he phones me and and complains about how I'm labeling him. But Warren is a very different thinker in the way that he approaches the funding of businesses and the raising of capital and the investments of assets. Go and watch that. And in a week where the press has been dominated by what is Bitcoin really, and some of the court judgments that have come out that have caused some confusion, Warren's presentations and thoughts around how Bitcoin can be very powerfully and effectively used to raise capital will stimulate your thinking. So go check that out. As we're talking about private markets and thinking about investments differently, the second quarter issue of Pensions World South Africa dropped this week as well. In fact, it dropped last Friday. And the special feature, coincidentally and just sublime timing, was private markets. And in that issue, you can find a number of articles explaining private markets, explaining the opportunities, and a special spotlight supplement really unpacking some of the managers who we are not used to hearing from. And it goes a long way, even, and I'm speaking from personal experience here, it goes a long way to demystifying some of these things. You see these names on buildings when you drive through big cities, and you think, who are those people? And they really are, or they really are compelling investment instances out there. And doing investments differently is not doing them badly and is not a breach or a challenge to your fiduciary duties. And I think that's important. I think that trustees sometimes follow the herd. Sometimes we feel incapable or perhaps a little bit scared to try something different because we're worried about getting sued, or we're worried about not doing the right things by our members. And that necessarily is not a good thing. And that brings me to my episode of Industry Insights this week with Terry Solomon, where I looked at the ins and outs of Fidelity cover in the new era and how these have evolved, how trustee responsibility and liability has evolved, and is your cover policy that is in place that protects your members from trustees doing bad things or negligence, is it comprehensive to protect any gaps or holes that might appear in your fund? It's an excellent Industry Insights episode. I do suggest and recommend that you go look at it. The other thing on EBNet Stream this week is the latest episode of Inside Private Markets, and you can go and check that out and catch up with this conversation that really is gathering momentum and coming at the retirement fund industry quite quickly now. And in a world where investment performance is all over the place, I loved a sentence that somebody used, and I think it might have been at Batsita, where somebody said these portfolios and opportunities and investments zig when others zag. And that, of course, talks to diversification and decorrelation. And really, if you are not up to speed on the private markets or unlisted or infrastructure conversation, you need to start getting on that bus. And EBNet has positioned a lot of content together with its publication or printed publication, Pensions World, to bring you up to speed. And did you see my pun there with speed and bus? For those of you who are born when I was born, you'll know what I'm talking about. Okay, so in addition to the treat of hearing from the finance minister at Batsita, we also got to hear from the regulators and supervisors. And Lebogang Mogashwa, the pension funds adjudicator, and Zarina Kamruddin, the newly promoted executive director of retirement fund supervision, sorry, at the Financial Sector Conduct Authority, both sat in a fireside chat and conversation about the supervisory intentions that they will be prioritizing over this year. There was lots of conversation around Section 13A, and I know that that is a big issue for many of you out there, especially as Two-Pot has shone a spotlight on that. And we can expect some definite changes from the FSCA and the pension funds adjudicator on that. And I don't want to misquote Zarina, but her comment was, and I paraphrase, the time of soft touch regulation and supervision is over. Now, I don't think that's a threat. I think that's a definitive stance that the Conduct Authority is taking as the number of funds reduce in the country by virtue of consolidation into umbrellas. The Conduct Authority is going to use the freedom of time and resources that they now have. Instead of supervising a whole bunch of funds, they're going to supervise less funds, but in far more depth and in far more detail. They use the word intrusive. So 13A, a problem. The other thing that keeps Zarina up at night is trustee corruption. Now, this is a very kind of, what's the word I can use? This is something that we don't want to talk about. But Zarina was very emphatic in her statement that your position as a trustee is there to look after members' best interests and, to use her words, not line your own pockets. So I think we can see some more stuff coming out around that. Also unclaimed benefits. But the thing I really want to get to is the conversation around fees and the value for money framework, which Zarina confirmed and indicated would be out and published by the Conduct Authority during this year still.
Hiya pals, greetings from Sammy. EBNet is proud to bring you top quality content from experts across the financial services industry in South Africa and internationally for free. Your support helps us in doing this. All we ask is that you subscribe to our channel by clicking the subscribe button below. Share this video with others you think will benefit from it. And give us a thumbs up if you are enjoying the content. That way you help us help you. Thank you from the team at EBNet. For more great content, please visit www.ebnet.co.za. Ciao, ciao, and bye-bye.
Both Zarina and the Pension Funds Adjudicator were also very supportive and encouraging funds to monitor their complaints and to get down and dirty in the complaints that members of your funds may have. And the reason for that is by being proactive about addressing complaints quickly, it alleviates the number of complaints that are being directed to the adjudicator's office. Now, Lebogang mentioned that his office, staffed by 84 individuals, dealt with 13,000 complaints over the last year, which is a marked increase from prior years and certainly from the 10-year average. So I think the call and the sincere request by the authorities is that funds look more proactively at their complaints, use the opportunity of complaints to measure outcomes, and that links to a conversation around COFI, but really sincerely try and resolve some of these complaints, because COFI is coming and complaints is in there. And I'm certain that complaints will be one of the outcomes or indicators of outcomes that funds can use. So please manage those grumpy members and those members who express unhappiness about some of their outcomes with care and proactively to alleviate some of the resources downstream in the channel. While we're talking about COFI, I must mention that Zarina did say COFI will be landing in the next 4 to 6 months. You keep asking me where's COFI and when's COFI. I don't know. I keep bringing you the latest that I'm hearing, and hopefully we can we can all learn about that together. One of the more interesting conversations or articles that I published on our website, www.ebnet.co.za, was by Bowmans, who summarized the fit and proper, or the updated fit and proper assessments for directors. I posed the question in my daily newsletter, which I hope you do subscribe to, but I posed the question in my daily newsletter of, does fit and proper requirements extend to trustees? And if it doesn't, should it? Now, trustees manage a pot of numbers that were mentioned at Batsita were 7 to 8 trillion rand worth of monies and other people's money. And really the ask of trustees is that, or I would say the minimum ask of trustees is that they remain fit and proper and updated on what is going on. And I think many trustees out there simply do the 22 modules of the trustee toolkit and don't really think about the importance of staying up to date. One of my questions that I posed to Terry Solomon in my talk with her under Industry Insights was, if the trustees of a retirement fund don't keep their knowledge up to date and current, is that negligence? And how does that affect a fund's trustee fidelity policy? And you can go and check that out. As I say, it was a great conversation. The last kind of highlight that comes to my mind around Batsita was some very cool stats from Old Mutual Corporate and their survey that they did of around 35,000 members. I think 35,000 members is a compelling response. And so there are some insights that we can draw from that. And I'll challenge those who challenged me at the conference around, okay, so we've got these stats now, what, Two-Pot is around and we should just be doing it. Yeah, Two-Pot's around, and we certainly are administering funds the way we should. but the member behavior gives us insights. And when we enter an era of outcomes, all the insights can help us build towards outcomes that we have identified. I'm going to leave it at that. Go check out my summary article of day 2, and you'll see an update on those stats. And so this is not how many members are withdrawing. This is around what do the members who are withdrawing look like, and what and why are they withdrawing for, and to do what with that money. I'm going to leave it at that. Interesting articles today on EBNet is how sleep is important for you, and I love sleep, and how sleep is important for you. But it raises the question of, what highlights the question of the ability to make good decisions, and how that is based on your physical well-being. And more we're seeing this integration of not only financial well-being, but this kind of idea of holistic well-being. And it could be my mental health, it could be my physical health, but all of these things have an impact on the financial decisions and other decisions that I may make. And it's important that we start exploring this kind of integrated benefit world where the benefits that an employer provides in their employee value proposition kind of come together and talk meaningfully to the employee. And that might not only be for employers, it could be for any of the product providers out there. It's pointless, or I think it's archaic, my word, to build product in isolation. I think more and more we're starting to see a conversation around integrating these benefits and making them accessible to the individual financial consumer where they are in their specific or unique points in their life journey and life story. Talking about that, we will be launching a new podcast series called Beyond Benefits together with Alex Forbes, and unpacking some of those conversations. The other new podcast series is The Art of Manager Fusion, and that talks to multi-management. And I'm not going to take any more away from that. You can go look on our website. The other conversation that Two-Pot prompted in my mind was, if we are forcing retirement fund members to preserve 2/3 of their monthly contributions, why are we so quick to pay away death benefits in cash to beneficiaries? I had a conversation with David Herford, the CEO of Fairheads Benefit Services at Batsita, and posed this question to him, and we're going to be hosting a webinar on the 17th of June to unpack this exact question. Now, I know a lot of you are going to tell me, we take the money and we pay it in cash to the guardians or to the caregivers because that's what the pension funds adjudicator told us to do. I'm not convinced that's what the PFA told us to do, and we're going to be exploring that more with those who are close to this conversation. And I think trustees, management committees, service providers, administrators, consultants, advisors are missing a critical piece of this conversation. And so, like we do at EBNet, is we surface the things that you might be missing so that we can challenge your thinking. Go ahead, please register for that webinar. The registration link is down below. While you're down below, hit like, hit subscribe, share this with your family and friends. We've got interesting content and more interesting content coming in the future. And as I say, we want to stimulate and provoke your thinking so that together we deliver a product and an industry that South Africans can trust, and that will build South Africa going forward. Until next week, then.